Hello viewers, welcome back to this episode of China Pow. In this episode, we will discuss whether China has slipped back to the retro era. If you've been watching Chinese television or if you've been reading China's newspapers, you will realize that the China of 2000s suddenly seems to have moved back into the China of the 1950s. China's state broadcaster CCTV has just released a documentary on China's efforts in the Korean War of the 1950s. China's first movie on the Korean War in the 1950s has been re-released for an audience of the 2020. This movie, called The Battle on Shankangling Mountains, talks about the heroic sacrifices of China's youngsters, the China's volunteer army that fought in the Korean War. On October 23rd, President Xi Jinping addressed the nation. He addressed the nation on the 70th anniversary of China's entry into the Korean War. The speech is very important because he spoke about the need for a younger generation to emulate the patriotism of its forebearers, of the people who founded and forged the Chinese nation in blood and sacrifice. He also highlighted the need for this young generation to be able to fight the foreign invaders that seem to be around or seem to be encircling the nation. President Xi Jinping also visited the military museum in Beijing, where an exhibition of China's contribution in the Korean War, efforts is underway. This is perhaps the first time since the 2000s that there has been such a high level or such a high voltage focus on China's efforts in the Korean War. The question that we need to be asking is, why is this in the focus now? And what does China seem to gain? How does China gain? If we want to understand, we have to jog back to the 1950s. In the 1950s, the Cold War had just started. The world was divided into two groups: the communist bloc led by the USSR and the capitalist bloc led by America. Now, the Korean War was really triggered by North Korea invading the South. North Korea did this with the help from the USSR and from China, and this is where Chinese soldiers, or it was called as the volunteer army, fought in this battle. Now, China feels today that the world is again getting back to these blocks, to this kind of a polarization, where there are forces or there are countries which are arrayed against it. Recently, we saw foreign ministers from the so-called Quad grouping meet. The Quad grouping is basically Japan, Australia, America and India. The foreign ministers met. Now, China feels this was directed at it. There is a rebalancing of forces of sorts against it. This week, you had two American heavyweights from the Trump administration, Defense Secretary Mark Esper and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, visiting India and signing very crucial agreements on defense cooperation with India. Now, India and China have seen border skirmishes lately this year. And given this situation, China feels that there is a need to revive military memorabilia of the 50s, because the conditions of today are similar to the conditions of yesteryears. China has seen a great amount of discord with America. Its ties with America have dipped over technology and trade. Chinese tech firms, Chinese technology products are getting banned in different countries over national security grounds. The message is very clear that just like the Cold War, where America was trying to isolate and contain communist countries, America is now trying to do the same with China. Now, there are different, these things could be weighing on China's mind, but it remains to be seen how well this current generation will relate to memories or manufactured memories of a frozen conflict, of a conflict that is only limited to history books. The memories of that are now only limited to history books. China's last outing, China's last war that it fought was in 1979 against Vietnam. A lot of soldiers who fought during that war have retired in the last few years. In fact, you've had an entire generation of Chinese soldiers, of Chinese army, PLA, rank and file, which has not seen a war. Now, in this situation, it remains to be seen how well this campaign to revive memories of a forgotten conflict will strike with an audience of 2020, an audience of 2020 China, which has not seen conflict in the last many years. So friends, that's all for today. Keep watching, subscribe to China Bao and share my videos. Thank you. Thank you so much.